The Gospel of the Lord.
Praise to you, Lord Christ. Son, and Holy Spirit.
Amen.
I don't remember how I discovered it. Maybe I was reading about different types of bread on Wikipedia. But it sounded intriguing. Salt-rising bread. I like salt. I like bread. Of course, it turns out that salt rising is a misnomer. Food historians think it might come from an age when pioneer women would use heated salt beds to keep the starter warm as they traveled. The bread doesn't contain any more salt than any other bread. But here is the other intriguing part. It doesn't use yeast as a leavening agent. Instead, it uses bacteria. Not to turn you off from the bread, but it's the same bacteria that causes food poisoning and gas gangrene. The bread is perfectly safe, but I would advise against licking the dough spoon. I had a lot of extra time during this pandemic, so I decided to make some. I tried once, but the starter died, and I had to throw the dough out. It's very particular. I think the dog ate it, but he's okay. I decided to try another recipe. This one worked. Every website, every article you read talks about the smell. Honey, I was not prepared. I woke up after allowing the starter to rise in the oven overnight, and honestly, I thought the dog had had an accident on the floor. I searched far and wide for the present the dog left, but my nose led me to the oven. There it was, the bubbly starter. I peeled the plastic wrap back, and the smell nearly knocked me down. People have likened the smell to sweaty socks, but let me tell you, not even Tim's running socks have ever smelled like that. But I followed the next step, adding more flour, etc., formed loaves, managed to get the stink off my hands. Meanwhile, Tim, unbeknownst to me, was searching the house for whatever present the dog had left. Fast forward, the bread. OMG. Unlike anything I'd ever had, but not in a bad way. Like a Parmesan cheese bread. Perfect, toasted a little with a meal. Maybe the kingdom of heaven is like that. Full of unexpected surprises. Something unappetizing, I dare say even revolting, transformed into a feast. On the topic of leaven during Jesus' time, one commentator notes, the leavening agent of the time was created by setting aside a portion of leftover bread to spoil in order to create leaven used in future baking. Not spoiled enough, it is worthless and cannot cause the new batter to rise. Allowed to spoil too long, it not only ruins the bread, but can result in food poisoning. Leaven can be fatal. Only a small portion, like a mustard seed, is needed to leaven flour. The, quote, 3 measures of meal with which the woman mixes the leaven would produce enough bread for a wedding feast. Of additional interest in this parable, as in the parable of the lost coin found in Luke's Gospel, is that Jesus' role is likened to that of a woman. To what else could I liken the kingdom of heaven? In my class on spiritual practices, and before that in the college composition classroom, I used an exercise called a kitchen utensil. I'm sure you all went back and watched those videos, but I'll jog your memory. The author of this exercise writes, "We generally don't pay much attention to kitchen utensils as we use them, but many of them, when looked at closely, can be as engaging as a work of art." Maybe the kingdom of heaven is like that. This exercise, as you may have guessed, involves deeply examining a common kitchen utensil. I always said non-lethal when I was teaching in the public arena. You pick the utensil up and examine its features. You think about how it's manufactured, how it comes together. You reflect on its origin and ponder what was used before it came to be. Finally, you think about the need that the utensil fills and what its true value is. Have you ever written poetry about a kitchen ladle? Well, the directions for this exercise state, you might want to write a poem about this lowly object. Could this be how scribes are trained for the kingdom of heaven? Bringing forth out of lowly, ignored objects something new and surprising? Minister Talitha J. Arnold writes, "According to Matthew, the first thing Jesus does when he comes out of the wilderness is to proclaim, 'The kingdom of heaven has come near.' He demonstrates that nearness every time he heals someone, reaches out to outcasts, respects women, or cares for the poor. He also demonstrates that nearness through these kingdom parables. For Jesus, God's realm is not some esoteric kingdom in the sweet by and by, but as close as the next mustard bush or loaf of bread. That nearness, far more than the threat of eternal agony, is the basis for his call to believe. Of these 5 parables, only the last includes apocalyptic judgment and gnashing of teeth. The rest envision God in every nook and cranny of daily life, from kneading dough to plowing fields. Jesus transforms human life not by scaring the hell out of people, but by helping them see the heaven close at hand. Have you seen, tasted, embraced heaven this week? Have you stopped to try? I have. I put out a call on our social media pages for snacks and water for the children at Pinevale, this month's material offering, not to be confused with Outreach Sunday. And lo, our simple post has been shared all over Facebook. The snacks and water started to pour in, and in a big way. Trunkloads of things appearing, some by people with little to no association with the church. Could the kingdom of heaven be like this? I certainly think that it must be near. And when I walk into the nave and see all of these offerings gathered appropriately around the baptismal font, In case you were wondering, there is room for more. I will rent a U-Haul if I have to. Interestingly enough, I took a break from writing this sermon and walked in the nave to survey the offerings, and I could hear, faintly, Joni Mitchell through the wall. Then can I walk beside you? I have come here to lose the smog, and I feel to be a cog in something turning. Well, maybe it is just the time of year, or maybe it's the time of man. I don't know who I am, but you know life is for learning. We are stardust. We are golden. And we've got to get ourselves back to the garden. The kingdom of heaven has come near. And what of these fish who will, like the tares, be thrown into the furnace of fire? They are the ones who look but don't see. Namely, they don't see the everyday, the quotidian, the bread maker, the sneaky land surveyor, the merchant, the wide net, as being infused with the divine. What hell that must be. What weeping and gnashing of teeth when you can't see the kingdom of heaven all around you. Now, it's not always apparent, to be sure, especially these days. So don't look in the wrong places. Be still and know. Look and see. Seek and find. To not do this is, to paraphrase the poet Rumi, to be the mortar and bricks of your own prison. You hold the key. Here is the mystery of the kingdom of heaven. If you are waiting on a blinding light, a perfect kiss, angels bending near the earth to touch their hearts of gold, you'll miss it. A trashy weed, some sour bread, shifty people, and some stinky fish.
Amen.
Amen.